Tim Wright is the author of The Adventures of Toby Baxter, River Elf, the Giant, and the Closet, in which he takes readers on an agreeable romp towards adulthood in this light-hearted and diegetic middle-grade fantasy. Toby Baxter, an aspiring teenager, embarks on a dangerous quest to save a magical realm from stinky trolls, blending popular culture references with heartfelt lessons about confidence and heroism. And Tim joins us now. How are you today?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
So without giving too much away about the book, just take it from there if you can.
Well, sure. It's a story about a boy who's turning 13. And as is often the case, as boys and girls move into their teen years, they go through a lot of challenges, a lot of struggles to try to figure out now what it means to be an adult. And throughout history, stories like The Adventures of Toby Baxter, especially fantasy adventures, have sort of been a guide for readers, their parents, their grandparents, to take them through that process, through adventures that maybe don't look a lot like what normal kids go through, and yet all the emotions, all the challenges feel just the same.
So can you tell us a little bit about the main character himself, Toby Baxter, and his journey from kiddom to becoming a teenager?
Sure. So Toby is pretty much an average kid, maybe an average boy, in that he's okay with school, not a great student. He hates reading books, but absolutely loves reading comic books, especially Marvel comic books. So he's a big comic book fan. And he's just sort of trying to figure out who he is, what his strengths and weaknesses are. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, this person shows up, looks like a hobbit, turns out not to be a hobbit. And the hobbit leads him through Toby's bedroom closet into a magical land where Toby is called upon to be a hero. But he has no superhero powers. He has nothing that he thinks that he can offer to this world. And yet they think he's the hero who's going to save the day.
And how did you come up with a name? Because it's an excellent choice of first name, obviously.
Yes, well, I figured you might appreciate that. I'm not really quite sure. This was years ago. I was going to write a little kid's book for my grandchildren, and the name Toby Baxter just popped into my mind. I never got around to writing that book, and then when I thought about writing this fantasy adventure, that was the name I chose.
And the book's description mentions a magical land and a battle between elves and stinky trolls.
Yeah.
So what can you tell us about that magical realm and how Toby finds himself in the midst of the conflict?
So he's sort of led right into the conflict when he gets to Riverhome, which is the name of the place where the river elves live. They all begin to tell him what's going on, that they were at war with the trolls 25 years earlier. There's been peace, and now all of a sudden the trolls seem to be harassing them once again. And there's a sword, and this sword was created to protect the river elves, but only certain people can use it, and Toby is one of them. And what Toby's going to learn through the process is that the sword isn't really the magical power. He's the magical power behind the sword. It's his gifts, it's his thinking, it's his talents that will make the sword do what it needs to do to protect the river elves.
And the book, as well, is kind of light-hearted. So
Yes.
how do you balance the light-hearted elements with the coming-of-age parts of it as well?
Sure. Well, part of what I wanted to do was to create a book where kids would laugh at it, and not only kids, but their parents and grandparents as well, so they could read it together. So there are some references in there that the kids may not get, but their parents will, and their grandparents will.
Nothing dirty.
And nothing dirty at all. Nope, it's a kid's book.
Yeah.
And I decided that rather than make it a really dark fantasy adventure like you often get, say, with Lord of the Rings, to lighten it up, to make it fun, so that even when Toby is facing some really challenging moments, there's a little sense of humor about it, because we know that Toby is in this magical land. It's a different kind of world. And so on the one hand, we're never quite sure, is this a dream or is this reality? And as he walks along through the story, we're going to discover the answer to that.
And the book actually draws on a lot of popular culture, actually, doesn't it? Such as King Arthur, The Hobbit,
Yes.
Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and Star Wars. I suppose that's a diverse mix, isn't it, really? Because Diary of a Wimpy Kid is kind of teen, whereas The Hobbit and Star Wars, I'm sure teenagers have watched it, but it's for everybody. everybody, really, those, aren't they?
Yes. And one of the things that I really tried to do with this is rather than create or try to recreate the fantasy genre, so to speak, and come up with something radically new, I wanted to toy with a kid who sort of dumped into all of these sort of fantasy adventure tropes. And so I was a ferocious fantasy adventure reader when I was in college and a young adult. You name the fantasy adventure, I probably read it. Yeah. So I tried to pull from all of those things and not necessarily create something really different and new, but to use all of those things. And here you've got a boy who sort of dumped into these stories. And what would that look like if it was not just he's not just reading it, he's actually experiencing it and bumping into trolls, into gnomes, into wolves and elves.
Is it quite difficult to make a unique fantasy novel, or even if that's easy, making it stand out? Because there seem to be so many fantasy novels out there.
Oh, yeah. Making it stand out is really obviously a challenge because there are so many really, really good ones. Harry Potter, of course, Lord of the Rings, Chronicles of Narnia. And that's why rather than try to compete with that, it was to actually embrace all of those stories and sort of say, I love these stories, which I do. And how can we use the essence and the vibe of these great stories and just put a little twist on it that might be a bit different. Plus, I wanted to do something based on some work I've been doing for the last 15 years. That's working on rites of passage, which it's kind of a lost art now, but for many, many centuries, rites of passage were these moments, strategic moments where a tribe or a family or a church or a synagogue might take a boy or a girl through an intensive period where they'd really challenge them and help them think about what kind of man, what kind of a woman do you want to be? And so, you used the word didactic in the intro. That's kind of what I wanted to do, a little bit of subtle teaching. These are some things you want to think about now as you are in this in-between world. You're no longer a boy. You're not a man. You're no longer a girl. You're not a woman, but you're moving that way. So the decisions you make now will determine the kind of man or woman you're going to be in the future.
Do you think that's quite an important lesson for children to learn? Because as you say, certain cultures will do a rite of passage, but for a lot of children, probably most, they're not going to get that in real life.
Yeah, not anymore. There are, here in the United States, probably the one rite of passage that most kids go through is getting a driver's license.
Yeah.
But otherwise, for the most part, we've sort of lost that art. And the reality is that kids crave it, kids need it. And so if they don't have adults take them through a rite of passage, they'll make up their own somehow in some way, usually with their friends, like going off to college. And sometimes the rites of passage they create for themselves aren't always the healthiest. So however we do it, when our kids start moving into their teen years, we want to introduce them to great fantasy adventures, to thinking about what kind of a person do you want to be, and really helping them make some wise choices that really will shape their future for them.
And is that the only lesson or themes that you hope the readers will take away, or are there more?
Well, certainly there are a lot more. One is just, I hope the book, just when they read it, they experience some joy.
Yeah.
And part of what fantasy does is it takes you away from the real world a little bit and lets you use your imagination. I hope that will happen for kids. I hope when they read the book, they're doing what I do as I write it, and they're seeing it in their minds. They're going to see what very differently than I do, of course, but to just see the story, to see themselves in the story, to laugh, to think, now, what would I do if I were Toby in this moment and I was faced with this challenge? How would I respond? And then there are some things my wife and I, we love to correct each other's grammar. It's just a little tick we have. And so if I use the word I or who wrong rather than me and whom, we'll sort of playfully correct each other. So Toby has a challenge trying to figure out, is the word lie down or is it lay down? Is it who do I give this to or to whom do I give it? And so I throw that in a little bit just to have some fun with a bit of grammar for the kids.
And are there any lessons for the adults as well? Because you mentioned the book works on 2 levels.
Yes, I think it's for the adults. It's it may not necessarily have lessons for them. What I do hope it provides for them are some talking points, where they can read the book together. We know from brain science that reading together, even for young teens, just reading a book together out loud is really good for the brain. And the more words that kids process, both through reading and through listening to reading being done, the better. And so hopefully this is a tool for that. And then that parents use that as an opportunity to start asking those questions. Well, Toby's facing the question, what kind of man are you going to be? How are you going to show yourself right now in this moment? Let's talk about that. What kind of girl do you want to be as you grow up? What kind of boy do you want to be as you grow up? And I hope the book offers parents and grandparents the chance to have those discussions.
Well, this book is actually part of a series.
Yes.
So can you provide any hints or teasers about what readers can expect in future installments of Toby's adventure?
Sure, I sure can. So the book 2 is at the publisher and should come out at the end of this year. And it's called River Home for the Holidays. And Christmas is my favorite holiday, so I had some real fun with this one, with Toby going back to River Home. And it's a little darker to start the book. The book's a little darker at the start, but it's got a lot of Christmas fun in it. And then I just yesterday, as a matter of fact, finished the first draft of book 3, where Toby makes a trip to Hawaii with his family, and River Home finds him there. And so I'm looking forward to probably 7 books is my hope. And if people go to my website, timwrightbooks.com, and sign up for the email list, they'll actually get the prequel to the first book, which is free. And then I just finished another free ebook that will set up book 2, and that'll be available here in the next couple of weeks.
Excellent. Well, in the meantime, this book is, of course, called The Adventures of Toby Baxter, River Elf, the Giant, and the Closet. Just summarise, if you had to sales pitch it in 30 seconds, why should you buy it?
Because you're going to have a lot of fun reading with your children a story that they can relate to. There's going to be a lot of stuff in that book, little, as you mentioned, pop references, so they'll know what we're talking about. And it's going to take them to a magical land where they're going to have some fun. They're going to wrestle a bit. And parents, grandparents, and kids are going to have a chance to talk together. And there's nothing better than finding some tool to get you to talk with your kids.
Yes, excellent. Well, where are all the places that we're able to find this book?
Well, it's available on Amazon. And again, if they go to timwrightbooks.com, it can be found. There's a link there. And again, if they sign up for the email list, they'll get the free copy of the prequel. And then they'll get all the up-to-date stuff on when Toby's next adventures are coming out.
Yes. I thought you were talking about me for a split second, but well, many thanks for joining us today. It's been great to talk to you.
Well, thank you so much, Toby, and hope you have a great day, and all your listeners do as well.